Chapter 1. The Wedding Day. The air hung heavy with the scent of lilac, their white petals mirroring the crisp ivory of Anya's gown. It was a symphony of white, the lace of her dress, the satin of the tablecloths, the clouds that drifted lazily across the azure sky. The world seemed to have conspired to paint a picture of perfect happiness, a canvas upon which Anya's dreams were about to be realized. She stood before the mirror, her reflection a vision of ethereal beauty. Her dark hair, usually worn loose, was styled in a cascade of soft curls, framing a face that radiated a radiant joy. Her eyes, usually a vibrant hazel, sparkled with a love that seemed to illuminate the entire room. Today she was a princess in her own fairy tale, ready to embark on a journey of forever with the man she loved. Anya's heart thrummed with a mix of anticipation and excitement. The day she had dreamt of since she was a little girl was finally here. The day she would become Mrs. Daniel Hawthorne. The day she would start a new chapter with the man who had stolen her heart. Her bridesmaids, a kaleidoscope of vibrant personalities, bustled around her, their laughter echoing through the room. They were a whirlwind of pink dresses and excited chatter, their energy infectious. Anya's best friend, Sarah, a whirlwind of blonde curls and infectious energy, held up a delicate silver necklace, a gift from Daniel. "He really outdid himself, Anya," Sarah said, her voice laced with admiration. "It's beautiful." Anya smiled, her heart swelling with warmth. "He always knows how to make me feel special," she whispered, her eyes shining. But even as she basked in the joy of the moment, a subtle unease crept into her heart. A feeling of something being off, a discordant note in the symphony of happiness. It was a fleeting sensation, a whisper of doubt in the back of her mind, but it was there nonetheless. The unease intensified as the guests began to arrive. Daniel's family, a group of polished and reserved individuals, greeted her with polite smiles and measured words. Their eyes, however, held a strange, unsettling intensity that made Anya feel like she was being scrutinized, analyzed. Daniel, arrived with a smile that was a little too wide, a little too forced. His eyes, usually sparkling with warmth, seemed to hold a flicker of something else, a shadow that Anya couldn't quite decipher. "You look absolutely stunning," he said, his voice a touch too high, a touch too enthusiastic. Anya smiled, trying to ignore the prickling sensation at the back of her neck. "Thank you," she said, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. As the ceremony approached, Anya felt her unease escalate. The air in the chapel felt thick with an unspoken tension, a palpable energy that seemed to vibrate around her. The priest's words, usually comforting and reassuring, now sounded hollow, echoing in the vast space. Anya looked at Daniel, her heart pounding against her ribs. His smile was still there, but it felt strained, almost desperate. His eyes, usually full of love, now seemed to hold a flicker of fear, a fear that mirrored the growing unease in her own heart. The ceremony began, and as the priest spoke the words of the vows, Anya felt a cold hand grip her heart. It was a feeling of dread, of impending doom, a feeling that something was terribly wrong. And as Daniel reached for her hand, his touch cold and clammy, she knew that the perfect picture of happiness she had painted in her mind was about to crumble. The symphony of white was about to be drowned out by a storm of doubt, a storm that threatened to shatter her dreams and leave her adrift in a sea of heartbreak. Chapter 2. The Betrayal. The priest's voice, once a comforting balm, now grated on Anya's nerves. He spoke of love, of commitment, of a bond that would last a lifetime. The words, once filled with promise, now mocked her with their hollow emptiness. Anya's gaze locked with Daniel's, searching for the love she had believed in, the love that had brought them to this moment. But what she saw instead was a flicker of fear, a tremor of guilt in his eyes. "Daniel," the priest began, his voice echoing through the chapel, "do you take Anya to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Daniel's lips stretched into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He hesitated, a silence stretching between them, thick with unspoken words. Anya's heart pounded in her chest, a drumbeat of dread that echoed the growing unease in the room. Daniel, the priest's voice, once warm and reassuring, now held a note of concern. Daniel cleared his throat, his gaze flickering to the back of the chapel, then back to Anya. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a whisper barely audible above the hushed silence. I can't. The words, simple and brutal, shattered the illusion of happiness, leaving Anya reeling in a whirlwind of shock and disbelief. The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum that sucked the air from her lungs, leaving her gasping for breath. The whispers that had begun to ripple through the congregation grew louder, a chorus of murmurs and gasps that echoed the turmoil in Anya's own heart. "Daniel, what are you saying?" Anya whispered, her voice trembling. Her heart ached, a raw, open wound that throbbed with pain. Daniel's gaze dropped, his shoulders slumping. I've been seeing someone else." The words, spoken in a barely audible murmur, felt like a physical blow. Anya's world tilted on its axis, the perfect picture of her future shattering into a million pieces. Her eyes stung with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. "Who?" Anya choked out, her voice barely a rasp. The question, though simple, felt heavy, laden with the weight of betrayal. Daniel's gaze remained fixed on the floor. "It doesn't matter," he mumbled. "It's over now." But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The beginning of a new chapter. A chapter filled with pain, with doubt, with a love that had been shattered beyond repair. Anya felt a wave of anger surge through her, a fire that ignited in her heart, consuming the remnants of her trust. She wanted to scream, to shout, to unleash the fury that raged within her. But instead, she turned and fled, her white gown a stark contrast against the dark oak of the chapel doors. She ran, her feet pounding on the stone steps, her tears finally spilling over, a torrent of grief that washed over her. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs ached, until she collapsed on a bench in the park, sobbing uncontrollably. The world around her blurred, the laughter and chatter of the wedding guests fading into a distant hum. Anya felt lost, adrift in a sea of heartbreak. She questioned everything she thought she knew about love, about trust, about the very essence of her own worth. Fifth. How could he? How could he break her heart so cruelly, so publicly? She had given him her heart, her dreams, her future, and he had thrown it all away like a discarded toy, a broken promise. Anya felt a wave of self-pity wash over her, a bitter taste of despair that threatened to consume her. She felt like a fool, a naive girl who had believed in a love that was never meant to be. The world around her seemed to spin, her vision blurring with tears. She felt utterly alone, abandoned in a world that no longer made sense. She was a princess in a fairy tale, but her fairy tale had turned into a nightmare. Chapter 3. The Aftermath. The days that followed were a blur of whispered condolences and forced smiles. Anya's friends, a chorus of well-meaning voices, tried to comfort her, to offer solace and support. But their words felt hollow, their attempts at consolation like a band-aid on a gaping wound. Sarah, her best friend, stayed by her side, offering a comforting presence, a shoulder to cry on. She listened patiently as Anya poured out her heart, her voice cracking with pain, her eyes red-rimmed with tears. "He's a jerk, Anya," Sarah said, her voice filled with anger. "He doesn't deserve you. You're amazing, beautiful, strong. Don't let him make you think otherwise." But Sarah's words, though well-intentioned, did little to soothe Anya's wounded soul. The pain ran deep, a festering wound that refused to heal. She felt like a broken vase, shattered into 1,000 pieces, each shard a reminder of her shattered dreams. Anya retreated into herself, isolating herself from the world, from the pitying glances and whispered gossip. She felt like a pariah, a walking testament to a love that had gone wrong. The world felt like a stage, and she was the unfortunate actress who had been forced to play the role of the heartbroken bride. She spent her days in her apartment, surrounded by the remnants of her wedding plans, the discarded invitations, the unused tablecloths, the unopened champagne. Each item was a tangible reminder of the future that had been stolen from her, a constant reminder of the love that had been lost. The silence of her apartment was deafening, a constant reminder of the absence that had become her reality. She tried to distract herself with books, with movies, with anything that could take her mind off the pain, but the ache in her heart refused to subside. The world felt cold and unforgiving, a place where dreams could shatter and hearts could break. Anya felt lost, adrift in a sea of heartbreak, her understanding of love forever altered. She was a princess in a fairy tale, but her fairy tale had turned into a nightmare, and she wasn't sure if she would ever wake up. Chapter 4. The Old Friend. The days blurred into a melancholic haze, each sunrise a painful reminder of the life she'd envisioned, now shattered beyond repair. Anya found solace only in the quiet solitude of her apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of her wedding plans. The silence was deafening, a constant echo of the emptiness that had invaded her heart. One afternoon, a knock on the door startled her from a daze of melancholic memories. It was Olivia, a friend from college, her face etched with concern. Olivia, with her vibrant personality and infectious laughter, had always been a beacon of positivity, a stark contrast to Anya's current state of despair. "Anya, darling, I'm so sorry," Olivia said, her voice laced with genuine sympathy. She stepped inside, her warm presence a welcome respite from the cold silence that had enveloped Anya's apartment. Anya offered a weak smile, her heart heavy with a grief that felt too immense to articulate. Olivia, sensing her friend's unspoken pain, settled onto the couch, her gaze filled with understanding. "I know there are no words that can truly make this better," Olivia said, her voice soft and gentle. "But I want you to know that I'm here for you, whatever you need." Anya nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Olivia, sensing her friend's need for silence, simply sat with her, a silent presence that offered a comforting sense of companionship. After a while, Olivia spoke again, her voice laced with a hint of curiosity. "Anya, I know this is a difficult time, but I've been thinking, do you think there might be something else at play here? Something beyond Daniel's betrayal?" Anya frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice laced with a hint of skepticism. "I've always believed that life has a way of balancing things out," Olivia said, her eyes sparkling with a hint of mystery. "Karma, if you will. Maybe what happened with Daniel is a consequence of something you did in the past." Anya scoffed, dismissing the idea with a wave of her hand. "Olivia, that's ridiculous. I'm not a bad person. I've never hurt anyone intentionally." Olivia, however, remained undeterred. "I'm not saying you're a bad person," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "But everyone makes mistakes, Anya. Sometimes, those mistakes have consequences, even if they're not immediately apparent." Anya's skepticism wavered, a flicker of intrigue replacing her initial dismissal. "What are you suggesting?" Anya asked, her voice laced with a hint of curiosity. Olivia leaned forward, her gaze intense. "I'm suggesting that maybe this isn't just about Daniel. Maybe it's about something deeper, something you need to face." Anya's mind raced, trying to make sense of Olivia's words. She thought back to her past, searching for any wrong she might have committed, any hurt she might have inflicted. But her memories were a jumbled mess of happy moments and youthful indiscretions. Nothing that could possibly justify the pain she was enduring. "I don't know, Olivia," Anya said, her voice laced with doubt. "It all feels so random, so unfair." Olivia nodded, understanding the weight of her friend's pain. "I know it's hard to believe," she said, "but sometimes the universe has a way of making things right. Maybe it's time to look back, Anya, to see if there's something you need to address, something you need to make amends for." Anya's gaze drifted to the window, her thoughts swirling with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Olivia's words, though seemingly far-fetched, had planted a seed of doubt in her mind, a seed that refused to be ignored. Maybe Olivia was right. Maybe there was something she needed to face, something she needed to make amends for. Maybe her heartbreak was a consequence of a past wrong, a karmic debt that needed to be settled. The thought was unsettling, but it was also strangely liberating. It offered a glimmer of hope, a possibility that her pain was not simply a random act of fate, but a chance to find redemption, to heal her wounds and move forward with a renewed sense of purpose. As Olivia rose to leave, Anya felt a surge of gratitude for her friend's unwavering support. Olivia had offered her a new perspective, a path to healing that she hadn't considered before. "Thank you, Olivia," Anya said, her voice filled with a newfound sense of determination. "I think you might be right. Maybe it's time to look back." Olivia smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "I'm always here for you, Anya," she said, her voice filled with love and support. "Whatever you need, I'll be there." As Olivia left, Anya felt a sense of hope bloom in her heart, a fragile hope that was tinged with uncertainty. She had a lot of soul-searching to do, a lot of past to confront. But for the first time since her heartbreak, she felt a glimmer of optimism, a belief that she could find healing and redemption. The journey ahead would be difficult, but she was ready to face it. She was ready to embark on a journey of self-discovery, a journey that might lead her to the answers she desperately sought. And maybe, just maybe, it would lead her to a love that was true, a love that was meant to be. Chapter 5. A Dark Reflection. The weight of Olivia's words settled heavily on Anya's heart. She spent the next few days lost in a labyrinth of memories, her mind sifting through the tapestry of her past, searching for any wrong she might have committed. The more she searched, the more she felt a sense of unease, a nagging feeling that something was amiss. One evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by the remnants of her wedding plans, a particular memory surfaced, a memory she had long buried deep within her subconscious. It was a memory of Leo, a college friend who had been deeply in love with her. Leo, with his soulful eyes and shy smile, had been a constant presence in her life during their college years. He was a talented artist, his canvases bursting with vibrant colors and raw emotions. He had a quiet intensity that drew Anya to him, a depth that she found both intriguing and unsettling. Anya had always been drawn to the confident, the charismatic, the ones who exuded an aura of success. Leo, with his quiet demeanor and unassuming charm, had never quite fit the mold of her ideal partner. But she had found herself drawn to his gentle spirit, his genuine warmth, his unwavering devotion. She remembered the countless hours they had spent together, sketching in the park, discussing their dreams and aspirations. He had poured his heart out to her, confessing his love in a voice that trembled with emotion. But Anya, blinded by her own ambition and infatuated with the idea of a grand love story, had rejected him. She had dismissed his feelings, telling him that they were just friends, that she didn't see him in that way. The memory of his hurt, the way his eyes had clouded with disappointment, the way his smile had faltered, filled Anya with a pang of guilt. She had been cruel, she realized, her words cutting him like a knife. But that wasn't the worst of it. Anya remembered the incident that had truly shattered their friendship, the incident that had left Leo heartbroken and humiliated. It had been a college party, a night of loud music, cheap beer, and fleeting connections. Anya, caught up in the excitement of the moment, had been flirting with a popular football player, a handsome, arrogant jock who had been vying for her attention. Leo, seeing her flirtation, had approached her, his face pale with a mixture of hurt and anger. He had tried to talk to her, to reason with her, to remind her of their friendship. But Anya, blinded by her own ego and the thrill of the moment, had dismissed him with a wave of her hand. "Leo, you're being ridiculous," she had said, her voice laced with disdain. "It's just a little fun. Don't be so dramatic." She had then turned her attention back to the football player, laughing at his jokes, flirting with him openly, deliberately ignoring Leo's presence. Leo, his face contorted with pain, had turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped with defeat. He had never spoken to her again. Anya remembered the guilt that had washed over her in the aftermath of that night, the way she had tried to reach out to him, to apologize for her behavior. But Leo had disappeared, leaving behind a void in her life that she had never been able to fill. As the memory faded, Anya felt a wave of shame wash over her. She had been so callous, so insensitive, so blinded by her own desires. She had hurt Leo deeply, and she had never made amends. Anya's gaze drifted to the wedding photos scattered across the coffee table, pictures of a happy couple, a love that had been a lie. She realized that her heartbreak was not simply a random act of fate, but a consequence of her own actions. The pain she was enduring was a karmic debt, a consequence of the hurt she had inflicted on Leo. It was a realization that was both terrifying and liberating. It meant that her pain was not simply a punishment, but an opportunity for redemption. Anya knew that she had to find Leo, to apologize for her actions, to seek his forgiveness. It was the only way she could begin to heal her own wounds, to find peace with her past and move forward with a clean slate. The thought of facing Leo filled her with a mix of anxiety and determination. She knew that he might not want to see her, that he might be angry, that he might not forgive her. But she had to try. It was the only way she could begin to make things right. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Anya's mind was filled with images of Leo, his gentle smile, his soulful eyes. She hoped that he was happy, that he had found peace and fulfillment in his life. But she also knew that she had to face him, to confront her past and seek his forgiveness. It was a journey she had to take, a journey that would lead her to a deeper understanding of herself and the consequences of her actions. It was a journey that might lead her to redemption, to healing, and maybe, just maybe, to a love that was true. Chapter 6. Guilt Rises. The insistent chirping of the alarm clock ripped Anya from a dream that was both vivid and agonizing. She saw Leo's face, etched with a pain she had inflicted, his eyes filled with a hurt she couldn't bear to witness. A gasp escaped Anya's lips as she scrambled out of bed, her chest tightening with a familiar gnawing ache. The guilt, a constant ache in her chest, tightened its grip, making it hard to breathe. She had left him, a decision fueled by fear and a misguided sense of self-preservation. She ran a hand through her tangled hair, trying to shake off the lingering nightmare. She had convinced herself that it was the best choice, that their paths were diverging, that their love was a fleeting flame that had burned out. But a cold dread settled in her stomach, a voice whispering that she was fooling herself. But the truth, like a persistent whisper, was slowly unraveling the fabric of her self-deception. The memories, once buried deep, now surfaced with relentless frequency. Anya flinched, her eyes wide with a mixture of pain and regret. The way Leo's hand had trembled when he held hers, the way his eyes had lit up when she laughed, the way his voice had softened when he whispered her name. Each memory was a dagger piercing her heart, reminding her of the love she had so carelessly discarded. Anya sat up in bed, the sheets tangled around her legs, her heart pounding against her ribs. She pressed her hand to her chest, trying to quell the frantic beat, but it only seemed to intensify. The weight of her guilt was suffocating, a heavy cloak she couldn't seem to shed. She had to do something, anything, to ease the burden. She thought of reaching out to him, of apologizing, of begging for his forgiveness. But a wave of fear washed over her, leaving her paralyzed with indecision. But the fear, a cold serpent coiled in her stomach, held her back. What if he didn't want to hear from her? What if he was already moving on, his heart closed to her? The thought of him with someone else, someone who could make him happy, sent a fresh wave of pain through her. A strangled sob escaped her lips as she buried her face in her hands. She knew she had to face him, to confront her guilt, even if it meant exposing herself to further heartache. She spent the day consumed by her thoughts, her mind replaying their last conversation, their last kiss, their last goodbye. Anya paced her apartment, the walls closing in around her as the guilt gnawed at her, a relentless beast that refused to be appeased. She knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the city, Anya made a decision. Her shoulders slumped with exhaustion, but a glimmer of resolve flickered in her eyes. She would seek Leo out, face her guilt and hope against all odds for forgiveness. She walked towards his apartment, each step a battle against the fear that threatened to consume her. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorbell, her knuckles white with tension. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorbell, her heart pounding in her chest. The door opened and there he stood, his face etched with a mixture of surprise and pain. Anya's breath hitched in her throat, her heart skipping a beat as she took in his vulnerable, broken expression. She had never seen him look so vulnerable, so broken. "Leo," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I need to talk to you." The guilt that had been haunting her for weeks finally had a face, a name, a voice. And Anya knew, with a certainty that shook her to her core, that she had to face it, to confront it, to seek redemption. Here is Chapter 7. Chapter 7. The Decision. The weight of Anya's guilt had become unbearable. It was a constant presence, a shadow that followed her every move, whispering doubts and accusations in her ear. She clutched at her chest as if trying to hold back the tide of her own emotions. She had tried to outrun it, to bury it beneath layers of distractions and denial, but it always found its way back, gnawing at her insides, leaving her raw and vulnerable. The memory of Leo's face, etched with pain and disappointment, haunted her dreams. Anya would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart racing, his image burned into her mind. His eyes, once filled with adoration, now held a distant sadness that mirrored her own. She had hurt him deeply, and the realization was a searing brand on her soul. Anya knew she couldn't continue to live with this burden. She felt a knot tightening in her stomach, a feeling of dread that had become her constant companion. She had to confront her guilt, to face the consequences of her actions, even if it meant facing the possibility of further pain. The thought of Leo moving on, of finding happiness with someone else, was a knife twisting in her heart. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to shut out the image that plagued her thoughts. But she also knew that she couldn't let her fear dictate her actions. She spent days wrestling with her emotions, her mind a battlefield of conflicting thoughts and desires. Anya paced her apartment, her hands wringing together, a silent plea for guidance trapped in her throat. The fear of rejection was a formidable opponent, but the desire for redemption was a powerful ally. She knew that she had to apologize, to seek his forgiveness, not for her own sake, but for the sake of her own healing. One evening, as the city lights began to twinkle, Anya made her decision. Her jaw tightened with determination, a spark of hope igniting in her eyes. She would find Leo, face him, and pour out her heart. The thought of it sent a tremor through her, but it was a necessary tremor, a tremor of hope, a tremor of healing. She knew it wouldn't be easy. He might not want to see her, might not even want to hear her apology. A wave of doubt washed over her, but she fought it back with a fierce will. But she had to try. She had to take that leap of faith, even if it meant falling. Anya took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Her fingers trembled as she picked up her phone, the familiar weight suddenly feeling foreign. She picked up her phone and dialed Leo's number, her fingers trembling as she waited for him to answer. The sound of his voice, a familiar melody that once brought her joy, now sent shivers down her spine. Anya closed her eyes, trying to recall the warmth in his voice, but only the hesitation remained. She could hear the hesitation in his tone, the guardedness that had replaced the warmth she once knew. "Leo," she began, her voice trembling, "I need to see you. I have to talk to you." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Anya held her breath, her heart sinking with every passing second. Anya held her breath, her heart sinking with every passing second. Finally Leo spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Anya, what do you want?" She took another deep breath, her resolve hardening. She pushed back the fear that threatened to engulf her. "I want to apologize. I want to explain myself. I want to try to make things right." There was another pause, then Leo's voice, softer now, tinged with a hint of hope. "Okay, come to my apartment tomorrow at 7 p.m. The phone clicked shut, leaving Anya standing in the silence, her heart a tangled mess of hope and fear. A tiny smile flickered on her lips as she realized she had taken the first step, a step towards reconciliation, a step towards healing. She had taken the first step, a step towards reconciliation, a step towards healing. But the journey ahead was long and uncertain, and Anya knew that the hardest part was yet to come. Chapter 8. Researching the Past. The weight of Anya's decision pressed down on her, a constant reminder of the impending confrontation with Leo. Anya felt a tremor of anxiety every time she thought about seeing him again, about facing his judgment. She knew she needed to be prepared, to understand what he had been through, to know how he had been living his life without her. Anya needed to understand him, not just as the boy she had loved in college but as the man he had become. She started with the obvious, social media. But Leo, ever the private person, had a minimal online presence. His Facebook profile was bare, his Instagram account dormant. She scrolled through his empty profile, a feeling of frustration building inside her. He had disappeared from the digital world, leaving Anya with a frustrating void. She turned to their mutual friends, hoping for a glimpse into his life. She reached out to them, her fingers hesitant on the keys, afraid of the answers she might find. But they too seemed to have lost touch with him. They offered vague updates, a move abroad, a new career, a newfound passion for cooking, but nothing concrete, nothing that truly painted a picture of the man she had once known so intimately. Anya felt a surge of frustration. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms, as she tried to hold back the rising tide of her emotions. She wanted to know everything about him, to understand the man he had become, to know if he had moved on, if he had found someone else. The thought of him with another woman, a woman who could make him laugh, who could fill the void she had left, sent a fresh wave of pain through her. She needed more. She needed to dip deeper, to uncover the truth behind the whispers of his new life. She spent hours online, scouring every corner of the internet, searching for any trace of Leo's existence. Anya felt a growing sense of desperation, as if the internet held the key to understanding the man she loved, but she was unable to unlock it. Finally, a glimmer of hope. She found a website, a blog dedicated to culinary arts, featuring a series of articles written by a chef named Leo Rossi. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the name, a familiar melody resonating in her mind. The name, the passion for food, the distinctive writing style, it all pointed towards the man she loved. Anya devoured the articles, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She found herself captivated by his writing, by his passion, by the life he had built for himself. She learned that Leo had moved to Italy, a country he had always dreamed of visiting, to pursue his passion for cooking. He had enrolled in a prestigious culinary school, honed his skills under the tutelage of renowned chefs, and eventually opened his own restaurant, a small, intimate establishment that had quickly become a local favorite. The photos that accompanied the articles were a revelation. Anya stared at his image, her heart aching with a bittersweet longing. Leo, now a man, his face weathered by the sun, his eyes sparkling with the passion of his new life, looked more handsome than ever. He seemed content, fulfilled, happy. And Anya, seeing him so vibrant, so alive, felt a pang of bittersweet longing. She had been wrong. She had assumed that he would be lost without her, that his life would crumble in her absence. She felt a surge of guilt, a wave of remorse for the assumptions she had made. But he had thrived. He had found his purpose, his passion, his happiness. And Anya, realizing the truth, felt a mixture of pride and guilt, a bittersweet cocktail that left her both happy and heartbroken. She had to see him, to talk to him, to understand the man he had become. She had to find out if he had found someone else, if he had moved on, if he had found happiness that didn't involve her. She had to apologize, to seek his forgiveness, to know if there was any chance for them, for their love, to bloom again. But first, she had to learn more about the man she had lost, the man she had hurt, the man she still loved. Anya closed the laptop, her heart filled with a mix of emotions. She realized that her journey was just beginning, that the road ahead was filled with uncertainty and possibility. She had taken the first step towards reconciliation, but the journey ahead, she realized, was only... Chapter 9. Setting off. The decision had been made. Anya, armed with a newfound determination and a heart brimming with a mix of anxiety and hope, was finally ready to face Leo. The research she had done, the glimpses into his life, his passion, his happiness had only solidified her resolve. Anya felt a surge of energy course through her, a determination to set things right. She was going to see Leo again, no matter what. She needed to see him, to apologize, to understand the man he had become, and to know if there was any chance for them to find their way back to each other. The thought of boarding a plane, of leaving the familiar comfort of her life behind, filled her with a nervous tremor. Anya took a deep breath, trying to quell the butterflies fluttering in her stomach. She knew this was a big step, but one she felt she had to take. She had never been one for spontaneity, for impulsive decisions. But this time, the need to confront her guilt, to seek redemption, to perhaps even rekindle the love they had shared, outweighed her fear. She sat at her desk, the laptop open before her, a map of Italy displayed on the screen. Her finger traced the route, her heart pounding with each click of the mouse, her mind filled with visions of sun-drenched vineyards and quaint Tuscan towns. She had chosen a small town in Tuscany, the heart of Leo's culinary world, the place where he had found his passion, his purpose, his happiness. Anya closed her eyes, visualizing the cobblestone streets, the sun-drenched vineyards, the aroma of fresh herbs and simmering sauces. A wistful smile touched her lips as she imagined Leo, standing in his restaurant, his face lit by the warm glow of the kitchen, his hands expertly wielding a knife, his eyes sparkling with passion. The image brought a pang of longing, a bittersweet ache that only served to strengthen her resolve. With a deep breath, she clicked on the booking website, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She typed in the destination, the dates, and her personal details, each keystroke feeling like a step closer to her goal. She entered her destination, her dates, her details, and then, with a click of the mouse, she submitted her request. The confirmation email arrived almost instantly, a tangible confirmation of her decision, a physical manifestation of her journey. Anya stared at the screen, her breath catching in her throat as she realized that she had made the decision, that there was no turning back. Anya stared at the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. She had booked a one-way ticket, a symbolic gesture of her commitment to this journey, a commitment to facing her past, to confronting her guilt, to perhaps even reclaiming her future. The days leading up to her departure were a blur of packing, planning, and a constant battle against the anxiety that threatened to consume her. Anya meticulously packed her bags, her hands shaking as she placed a few carefully chosen souvenirs from their time together inside, reminders of the love they had shared. Each item brought back a flood of memories, both sweet and painful. She packed her bags, filling them with clothes, toiletries, and a few carefully chosen souvenirs from their time together, reminders of the love they had shared, the memories she had tried to bury. She made a list, a mental checklist of things she wanted to say, things she wanted to understand. She practiced her apology in the mirror, her voice trembling, her heart aching. She wanted to find the right words, the words that could express the depth of her remorse and her yearning for forgiveness. She practiced her apology, her voice trembling, her heart aching. She envisioned their reunion, the look on his face, the words he might say. She prepared for the worst, hoping for the best. Finally, the day of her departure arrived. Anya stood at the airport, her suitcase at her feet, her heart a tangled mess of emotions. She glanced around nervously, taking in the bustling crowd, the flashing lights, the endless stream of people embarking on their own journeys, feeling a sense of both excitement and trepidation. She looked around at the bustling crowds, the flashing lights, the endless stream of people embarking on their own journeys. She felt a sense of both excitement and trepidation, a mixture of anticipation and fear. She took a deep breath, her eyes closed, and whispered a silent prayer. She prayed for courage, for strength, for the chance to make things right. She prayed for forgiveness, for healing, for a second chance at love, and for the strength to face whatever lay ahead. And then, with a final glance back at the familiar surroundings, she turned and walked towards the gate, ready to embark on a journey that promised to be both challenging and transformative, a journey that might just lead her back to the love she had lost. The plane took off, soaring into the sky, leaving behind the familiar landscape of her life, carrying her towards a new horizon, a horizon that held the promise of both pain and redemption, a horizon that might just lead her back to Leo. Chapter 10. Arrival. The plane touched down in Florence, its wheels groaning on the tarmac, a jarring reminder of the journey's end. Anya stepped off the plane, the warm Tuscan air washing over her, a welcome contrast to the sterile air of the aircraft. She breathed deeply, the scent of fresh herbs and blooming flowers a balm to her anxieties, but her heart still pounded a nervous rhythm in her chest. She had arrived. She was in Italy, the land of Leo's dreams, the place where he had found his passion, his purpose, his happiness. But as she stepped out into the bustling airport terminal, the reality of her situation hit her. A wave of apprehension washed over her, a sudden sharp pang of doubt as she realized how alone she felt. The language, the customs, the sheer volume of people all felt foreign, unfamiliar, intimidating. She felt like a fish out of water, a lone traveler in a sea of unfamiliar faces. She instinctively clutched her handbag tighter, trying to find a sense of comfort in the familiar weight. Her anxiety grew, a cold dread twisting in her gut, threatening to pull her back to the safe haven of her own life. She had been so focused on the journey, on the impending confrontation with Leo, that she had failed to fully grasp the magnitude of her undertaking. She was in a foreign country alone with no real plan, no real understanding of the culture, the language, the customs. She was a stranger in a strange land, a lone traveler in a world that felt both alluring and daunting. A fleeting doubt whispered in the back of her mind, a question of whether she had made a terrible mistake. But Anya was not one to be easily deterred. She had come this far, driven by a sense of guilt, a desire for redemption, a yearning for the love she had lost. She straightened her shoulders, a flicker of determination lighting her eyes. This journey was about more than just finding Leo. It was about finding herself, finding her own strength. She would not let fear stop her. She had to find Leo, to face him, to apologize, to understand the man he had become. She navigated the airport, her suitcase bumping against her legs, her eyes scanning the faces around her, searching for a familiar sign, a friendly face, a glimmer of hope. Panic flickered, her heart racing as she realized how lost she felt in this vast, unfamiliar space. She found a taxi, her Italian halting and hesitant, but the driver, a kind-faced man with a twinkle in his eye, understood her destination. Relief washed over her as she settled into the back seat, the familiar rhythm of the engine a comforting sound in the midst of her anxieties. The drive to the town was a blur of rolling hills, sun-drenched vineyards, and quaint villages. The scenery was breathtaking, a picturesque landscape that seemed to exist in a timeless realm, untouched by the hustle and bustle of modern life. But Anya, her mind consumed by her mission, barely noticed the beauty around her. She stared out the window, her mind racing, replaying their last conversation, trying to anticipate his reaction, a knot of fear tightening in her stomach. She was focused on the destination, on the man she was about to meet, on the conversation that awaited her. The taxi pulled up to a small, charming restaurant, its facade adorned with vines and flowers, its windows glowing with a warm, inviting light. Anya's heart skipped a beat as she saw the name above the door, Leo's Restaurant. Excitement surged, a tremor of anticipation washing over her. This was it. She was finally here, on the precipice of confronting her past, of facing Leo and the truth of their story. This was it. This was where Leo lived, where he worked, where he had found his happiness. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She was here, at the doorstep of her past, ready to confront it, ready to face the man she loved, ready to try to make things right. She had arrived. The journey was over. The confrontation was about to begin.